engaging you and your why you're here. So one of our questions to you, we would love it if you could just put some answers in the chat box. What is your most significant concern regarding the climate crisis? If you guys could take a moment and put some answers in the chat box, we'll be taking a look at that and give you a few minutes to respond. I'm not seeing anything. Okay, great. Okay, so we've got loss of biodiversity. Absolutely, I completely agree with that. We're seeing massive extinction of many species right now, and that's a severe threat right now. Greenhouse gas emissions, thank you very much, Alan. Science denial, that's definitely a good one. Quality of life, very good. Let me see how dangerous it's going to affect a lot of people's health. That is one I think that we need to be talking more about for sure. And I know that's something that CLEO covers quite a bit. They have definitely had some very in-depth conversations about the effect on everyone's health. Thank you so much, Nicole. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, and what would you like to learn more about regarding the climate crisis? Are there some areas that you feel a little fuzzy about right now that you really want to get more information on? That's also something we'd love to hear. I'm seeing another comment here. Mycelium as a way to heal, renewal is possible. I absolutely agree and appreciate with that. I think there are a lot of solutions that we need to be putting more focus on, because I think that sometimes people become apathetic when they don't know that it's possible for us to actually fix this problem, but we need a lot of people involved and really making the changes the way we need to. How to influence energy policy in Florida. That is a great one. I feel like it's so ironic. We're the Sunshine State. I feel like we should be the sunshine energy state as well. And I know, go ahead, Laura.
Are we ready for the video?
Oh, wait. Tackling fossil fuels. Learn more about tackling fossil fuels. Absolutely. The more quickly we can get off that, the better. Anybody else? Okay. Okay. I think we're good. Great. Yeah. So we're going to show a short video, influencing divestment. That's a fantastic point. We can all be using our dollars and where we choose to put them to support a greener economy. I couldn't agree more. Great, yeah, so we were gonna show a short video with a little overview of CLEO's programs and how you can get involved. Great.
I want you to ask yourselves those tough questions, the ones we avoid, how we want to live, what do we want for our children, what do we want for our planet?
Our atmosphere is so finely tuned for what we need, and we're treating it like a dumping ground, a sewer. The health impact of climate change is a global problem, and we see the results of that on a local level.
If we fail to act now, then we will leave behind a fundamentally degraded planet for our children and grandchildren, a planet that resembles the futures that have been portrayed in dystopian Hollywood films, unprecedented inundation of our coastlines, droughts, floods, heat waves, superstorms. That's the future that we will see if we fail to act on climate.
The CLEO Institute was founded in 2010 with the drive to educate and empower South Floridians to act on climate. Founded by Caroline Lewis, a science teacher by training, her vocation led her to understand what was causing people's apathy towards the glooming climate crisis: knowledge.
We're in the middle of the sixth mass extinction.
Today, the CLEO Institute is the #1 nonprofit organization for climate education, engagement, and advocacy. Through Through programs like the CLEO Speakers Network, CLEO trains people to become climate speakers by breaking down the science, impacts, and solutions. CLEO's educational efforts are backed by a world-class expert advisory council of scientists, environmentalists, teachers, and government officials. While the world is already feeling the impacts of our changing climate, not everyone is feeling it the same way. CLEO is a leader in the climate justice movement, providing the resources and tools to the most vulnerable communities in South Florida that are on the front lines of the climate crisis.
I wanted to be an outreach for them.
Building communities' resilience through women is the cornerstone of our Empowering Resilient Women program. By teaming up with community members like the YWCA, CLEO is able to empower and educate women on how better to prepare for more extreme weather events like hurricanes while building community. CLEO works to remove barriers and build a wider coalition to fight climate change across faith-based communities, elected officials, and municipalities, schools, and cultural organizations. One of the most important voices that CLEO continues to amplify is that of our youth.
What do we want? When do we want it?
Their Gen CLEO program meets regularly with students across the region, training them to be climate ambassadors in their schools and communities.
Dear elected officials,
this is a crisis. Do your job. We'll be watching.
CLEO recently launched its Climate Resilient Schools initiative to bring their program into the classrooms while building a robust climate curriculum for Miami-Dade public schools. CLEO continues to expand its engagement through multimedia outreach, including television commercials, social media, and billboards. With statewide campaigns like the Florida Climate Pledge,
I care about climate change, and I care about climate change because it affects everybody, regardless of race, culture, and ethnicity.
Because I'm passionate about the success of my future.
I like the CLEO Institute because it takes the time to educate people about the importance of climate change and the things that we can do to improve our world.
You can have your voice heard too. Fund our climate action work today. The future of Florida is in your hands.
Okay. So the CLEO Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan organization exclusively dedicated to climate change education and advocacy. This is our 10-year anniversary. We were founded in 2010. We work across Florida with communities and their leaders to build climate literacy and mobilize climate action with a top-down, bottom approach. If you can look in the upper corner, that's the copy, that's a picture of CLEO. We're located at CLEO Conduit, which is on North Orange Avenue, downtown Orlando. And that's, we're happy to be here.
So as you can see, CLEO has a lot of programs that people can get involved with. So in addition to becoming a part of CLEO, joining some of our programs like CLEO Speakers Network, Gen CLEO, things like that. We can also definitely, donations really do help us to continue the work that we're doing. And we really do believe that an educated public is a public that tends to advocate for themselves, for the climate, and to use the power of their voices to really help transform the situation and to protect Florida. So we're really glad that you guys are all here. Now, not all of these programs are going to be coming to Orlando immediately, but we definitely have a few programs that we're going to be getting started with. A lot of these used to happen in person, but obviously with the situation now, we're doing a lot more programs that we've been able to move online.
Okay.
Thank you, Ari and Laura. So Gen CLEO is one of the programs we're most proud of, and it's been really successful. And as Aria mentioned, this is one that we will be launching in Orlando. The Gen CLEO program is aimed at high school and university students, but we do have some middle schoolers that join us as well. And the goal is to really provide the youth who join the Gen CLEO group with some advocacy tools. So typically the group meets once a month. We do in-person meetings, but now that we're moving to a sort of more digital world, we are doing digital online meetings. So that way we can include as well our Orlando youth and our Tallahassee youth. And when students join Gen CLEO, they have an opportunity to learn new skills. So one of the things that we teach them is how to become a CLEO climate speaker. So they get the tools and the resources to be able to communicate accurately climate science, impacts, and solutions. And that gives them the opportunity to then give peer-to-peer lectures either in their neighborhood, in their community, or at school. And we also provide other learning opportunities for these students, such as advocacy skills. A lot of our students have learned how to appropriately approach elected officials, how to speak at commission meetings, how to speak at school board meetings. A lot of our students have organized in the past year rallies, climate strikes, and they've been instrumental, especially in South Florida, the group that we have currently, in getting 6 different municipalities to declare climate emergencies. So we're really proud of our youth. We also have a youth podcast that we'll be launching soon. Our next Gen CLEO meetup is on May 5th. It will be an online meeting, and you can find information and the registration on our webpage under the event calendar. Next slide. So another program that I love, this is actually one of my favorite programs. It's one of the first programs that I had the opportunity to run at CLEO as a program manager, is the CLEO Speakers Network. This is another program that we're going to be launching in Orlando. And again, because we're moving to a more digital online world, we've shifted gears a little bit. But typically the CLEO Speakers Network is a very simple program. It's aimed at people from all walks of life. We've had students as young as 10 years old join the CLEO Speakers Network, and people as old as 75 and older graduate from the program. And really the idea is to build people's capacity to break down climate science, the impacts and solutions, so that then they can take those resources and those materials and go out and speak to a wider audience. So when you join the CLEO Speakers Network, if you join one of our cohorts, there's usually a training. That training typically is done in person. It's usually a few hours. Then we follow up with an online meetup for Q&A and questions. We also have a support group that we use through the WhatsApp. So we share resources. Students have the opportunity to ask questions. Go to the next slide. And then what happens is you get a PowerPoint deck, you put together your presentation, and then you present to CLEO staff and you get certified as a CLEO speaker. So this is really one of our advocacy programs as well, because a lot of our speakers have gone on post-graduation to present in their community. They've sat on panels for different environmental fairs. So the idea is really to get people from all walks of life to have the tools that they need, again, to accurately talk about climate science, impacts, and solutions, and then again, take it to a wider audience. So now that we've moved to a more digital world, we are currently offering an online CLEO Speakers Network cohort. This is the first time we've ever done that. So it's been open to the entire state since we have offices in Orlando and Tallahassee. We have over 50 people enrolled. So we're hoping to see hopefully all those 50 graduate in the next month or two. But again, when things change a little bit and we open back up, Orlando will either do an in-person CLEO Speakers Network, or we might keep it online, giving the opportunity to more people to join. Next slide.
We also have municipal trainings. We have government partnerships, mayor roundtables, and municipal workshops. Depending on the city's progress on climate resiliency planning and sustainability initiatives, CLEO works with the municipality to tailor the program to fit their needs. We provide municipalities with baseline knowledge of climate science, seriousness, and solutions. This is an example of some of the things that we've done, but it's a highly tailored program.
Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
As Laura mentioned earlier, and as you saw in the video, the short video that we showed in the beginning, CLEO is really dedicated to community resilience and climate justice. And it's really been one of the priorities for Caroline since the inception of the organization in 2010. Caroline started reaching out to the vulnerable communities right away when she opened CLEO, because she realized that our more vulnerable communities stand to lose the most when it comes to climate change impacts. She started doing listening sessions, forums, climate trainings to better understand what was going on in these communities and to gauge what their major concerns were. And a lot of things that came up were hurricane preparedness, flooding, exposure to extreme heat, and climate gentrification. So these are issues that we take really seriously. And again, I'm coming from a perspective where I'm working in Miami and South Florida, but of course, this is something we're going to be focusing on in Orlando as well as in Tallahassee. And so what we've done in Miami is we've created these climate crisis and hurricane preparedness workshops where we talk a little bit about climate change, what are the impacts, and then we, talk about the intersection of our vulnerability to hurricanes in Florida. And we offer hurricane kit items to get people to become more hurricane ready. Another one of the programs that we have that's aimed at tackling climate justice is our Empowering Resilient Women program. And this is one that we currently only have in Miami. And we designed this program mainly because we understand that globally, women tend to be more impacted by climate change. And again, in Miami-Dade County, 60% of our residents have trouble making ends meet. Women typically are often head of households, having to make a lot of different decisions. And that means that they're faced with a lot of those stressors that are a result of climate impacts. So the program is trying to get these women to become even more resilient than they already are, just by providing extra resources. We focus on climate education and looking at the impacts on health from a gender lens. We also talk about hurricane preparedness, but also how can they better prepare financially in preparation for extreme weather events. We discuss civic engagement. How can these women become more involved in their households and also in their communities from a civic standpoint? And then we also bring in leadership skills. We want to make sure that these women have new skills in their toolbox so that when they go out into the community, when they're done with the program, they can help build more resilient communities.
In Orlando, we're working with the Climate Justice Coalition on mutual aid. And mutual aid is not charity, it's how neighborhoods, organizations, and people can share resources. It's uplifting, it's bottom-up planning. We're working on that right now. We're also involved with the East Central Regional Planning Collaborative on Resiliency. And the Coal Ash, the East Orlando Coalition for a Clean Environment. We stand behind the families that want clean air, clean water, and are fighting for their neighborhood. On May 6th, we do have a webinar, and you will receive a follow-up email that will give you links to all of our future programs. One of them is on understanding privilege. We're partnering with Dr. Whaley with the Valencia College, the Peace and Justice Institute. We're hosting the webinar on May 6th.
Another one of the programs we have is the CLEO Teachers Network. Of course, this is geared toward educators. And every year in the fall, we offer a training for educators from K through 12 of different subjects to figure out innovative ways that they can include climate change across the curriculum. This is a really interactive training. It usually is about 2.5 to 3 hours. The teachers get a climate training, and then there's a lot of interactive activities where they work together to figure out different ways that they can bring climate change into their classroom. We've had a lot of positive feedback from this program, and we hope to be able to bring this to Orlando and Tallahassee as well in the future. The CLEO Teachers Network, we also offer a quarterly newsletter, so anyone from anywhere in Florida can sign up for the newsletter. Aria will put the links in the chat, and again, you can get all these links in the follow-up email. But the newsletter offers different resources, materials that are relevant to teachers and climate change, and helps them, again, find new resources that they can include or share with their students. And as we move through the year, we're always trying to come up with, creative ways to bring new opportunities for teachers to learn more. So we will be offering webinars as well to a lot of our educators, again, bringing tools or just relevant resources that they can share with their students.
So CLEO, our whole mission here is to educate, and we really do believe that an educated public, especially when it comes to Florida, when you understand what's at stake and what we can actually do to help turn this around, that using the power of your voices is how we're going to see the change that we really do need to see here, honestly, as quickly as possible. Personally, I feel like we're living in a time where we've got some humongous challenges in multiple directions, but we also have humongous opportunities right now. So I do hope that a lot of you will take this opportunity to join with CLEO and to see how you can get involved to really help connect the dots between climate change, its current effects, how this is a threat multiplier, really. So everything we're seeing right now with COVID-19 would be definitely amplified if we don't take action on climate. So we'd like to inspire you, educate you, give you the tools that you need to really go out there and use your voices and get involved. So, together we've got this. Alone, it's much more challenging, but we're here to help empower you, for sure.
Okay,
Laura?
So we want to see if you have any questions. If you hold your cell phone up to the slide, you should be able to reach our main webpage, or hold it up to the QR code. If not, like I said, you will get a follow-up email, and there's some links probably in the chat box. And do we have any questions? I can't read the questions. Aria, do we have any questions for anybody?
Not any yet. I'm trying to put this this last link up in the chat box too.
Yeah.
But there are, I think I've got something here. Yeah, so someone's curious how they can find some places to speak when they join with CLEO, how they could get involved with CSN and where they might find places to speak if that's what they were to do.
Sure, I'd be happy to tackle that question. So, like I said, the current cohort that we have is already underway, so registration is closed. But when we open the next cohort, we welcome anyone who wants to become a CLEO climate speaker. And what we do is throughout the program, we encourage people to think about where can they connect with their community. So, for example, we've had people who've gone into their churches and given climate presentation to their faith-based groups. We've had people who've done it for their HOA. So for example, I live in a sort of a small condo association, and some of those associations have little rec rooms where communities can gather. That's a great way of doing it. We've often collaborated with public libraries across the county, and they're really open to having this kind of programming as well. So if someone's interested, CLEO can always help with that collaboration, making those connections. We also just encourage people to start the conversation at home. We know that a lot of people are worried about climate change, but statistics show that the majority of us don't even talk about it with our friends and family. So once you become a CLEO climate speaker, we really encourage people to practice with our family members. And, it's always good to start at home and then to branch out in your community. We've also had former speakers who've spoken at their place of business, their place of work. So if you see an opportunity to do a lunch and learn, that's something that other people have done as well.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. We actually have another question from an anonymous attendee. Can CLEO come to our organization to do a climate presentation and do a lunch and learn?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you're based in Orlando, whoever asked the question, I hope that you are. This is definitely, the bread and butter of CLEO's work. We're all about spreading the word, reaching a wider audience, and getting more people to join the work that we're doing in the community. And a huge part of our community outreach is precisely that, going out and doing climate change presentations, helping people better understand, helping them connect the dots. And then, of course, we hope that when they connect the dots, they're also more inclined to take action. So we also offer those kinds of opportunities as well. So yeah, absolutely. All you'd have to do is contact, Laura, who's the program manager at the CLEO Institute, if you're based in Orlando, and she could help you with that.
Okay. Here's another question. I think this is a very good one. Can CLEO expand to other states and go talk to other students in other states in the future? Once this dies down, of course.
Yeah, that's a great question. While we're based in Florida, CLEO's participated in panels and conferences across the United States. We've spoken in California. We've spoken at a lot of different events. We've had students also who've come visit us from different parts of the world, from the United States, from Mexico, and they've asked to come to our offices. And so we've been able to host people and, discuss climate change and give them a presentation as well. And again, since we are expanding digitally, this is something that CLEO can definitely do. We try to reduce our carbon footprint as much as we can. So we're happy to share our climate knowledge, present our trainings to people all over the United States, especially if it can be done via webinar.
Okay, great. Yeah, so there's another one. Just wondering what they should do personally to lower their own carbon footprints, if we have some suggestions for that.
Sure. Would you girls like to respond to that?
We both can. My favorite is, going to a plant-based diet, driving an electric car, doing an energy assessment of your home, buying Energy Star equipment in your home, using less water, educating yourself, using the power of your vote to vote for climate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that has surprised me the most along this journey, a couple of things have surprised me in terms of impact, but one of them is the impact of food waste and how we get our food, treat our food in general. When we throw out our food, it basically turns into methane, which is one of the most potent greenhouse gases, even more powerful than just carbon dioxide that we're usually thinking of in terms of impact. And when we utilize that food in a more sustainable fashion, we're actually putting more nutrients into the soil, which helps to build deeper root systems, which draws down carbon dioxide. Right now we have a lot of commercial industrialized agricultural systems that we rely on, and there's actually a footprint because we're using the wrong type of fertilizers, and so we really need to transform all of our systems in some really big ways. But the good news is that it's absolutely doable if we all take this seriously enough and we're committed to making the changes that we need to make. I'm seeing another question here. Is there anything I can do about climate change while being in quarantine? I think that's a great question. Does anyone else want to take that?
Sure. We've actually had this question a lot, and I think a lot of us feel stuck at home. But again, we can still do individual things, but we can also still take a look at what's going on from a broader perspective. And so, for example, Laura and Ari already mentioned a few things that we can do at home, lowering our carbon footprint in general. A lot of us aren't driving, so that's already a plus. But we can also take a look at, reading the news, staying informed, learning more about climate change, and also reaching out to our elected officials while we're at home in quarantine. I think a lot of us have a little bit more time on our hands, and that's really an opportunity that we should grab onto. And if we see something that we're not happy with linked to climate change, and again, CLEO shares a lot of news, relevant news on our Twitter, on our Instagram, and on our Facebook. And we also have the Florida Climate Pledge, which is one of our campaigns. It's a Connect the Dots campaign that is really aimed at getting Floridians to connect the dots on climate change. We're going to share all these links with you. But I highly encourage everyone to stay up to date, read. And if you see something that you're not happy with, then I encourage you to pick up the phone and call your elected official, whether it's your local, your state, your commissioner. We tend to forget to do that, to advocate more. And now that we do have a little bit more time on our hands, many of us aren't commuting anymore. That's one thing that I would like to just highlight. Laura, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I would like to say, even additionally to advocating, we need people to run for office. We need people to run to sit on some of the boards, the planning boards, the housing boards, all the different boards. We need people to also get actively involved with their government, more than just going and attending a meeting, but we need good people to run for office. So that's a good way to affect policy as well.
I agree. We really do need some big changes when it comes to having our governments really support the changes that are necessary. There's so much that we can be doing personally, but of course, the more people who are making those changes, it really amplifies and helps move the market, which I think is really important. But when the government supports these kinds of changes, that's where we see the really large shift that we need. We've got another question here. What are some of the lessons learned from the current COVID-19 crisis that we can apply to the response to climate change? I think that's a really great question. I've been really inspired. I know there's been a lot of conversation within the environmental community about this. And I'm just really inspired to see not only the impact that when we stop traveling so much, a lot of people are working from home, we're not flying as much, and just to see how quickly things can start to seem like they're improving is inspiring. And I think that it's giving people a time, personally, I think it's giving people a time to reflect about what's really important and where their values lie. And that it is possible to make large changes. So personally, that really inspires me. And as far as other lessons we've learned, does anyone else want to chime in there with their thoughts on that?
Sure, Aria. I agree. I think there's some interesting parallels to be drawn between the current crisis and the climate crisis. And I think we definitely see a lot of disparities in the COVID crisis, and that's similar in climate change, right? Our more vulnerable communities, communities of color are more affected by COVID, and that's the same with climate change. So I think we're seeing ways in which we can use the current crisis to inform the climate crisis. And again, this is an opportunity to read more and better understand what's really going on with climate change. And again, I just want to go back to the other ways that we can reach out to our elected officials. You don't have to call them if you're not comfortable doing that. You can write letters to the editor, you can email, and there's a lot of different petitions going around that directly link you to your elected officials. I think we've also noticed the impacts, of course, on the healthcare system, and we do know that climate change has major impacts on health as well. So if we can use what's going on now to continue to push our elected officials in the right direction and make sure that they're carving out policy that is going to protect us in the future, because climate change, we may not be seeing across the board. I'm talking about the United States. We may not all be experiencing the climate change impacts, but we will be sometime in the future, whether it's us, our kids, or our grandchildren. And so we really have to make sure that we have preventative policies in place to think ahead and make sure that we don't fall into the same sort of trap that we've fallen into with COVID, where a lot of our systems have been taxed and not fallen apart per se, but let's just say our healthcare system has been heavily taxed during this. And we don't want to see the same thing in the future when it comes to climate change.
Yeah. I just want to throw in a couple other things too that I was thinking about is in general, it's listening to science. That with COVID-19, people are finally listening to scientists and respecting what they have say, but then you also have the deniers out there as well, and we're all impacted. Whether you believe or you don't believe, we're all going to be impacted by this. And, you know, just that personal responsibility that with COVID-19, I think that we're seeing how connected we all are, that if one person does something one place, that can reach all the way around the world. And it's the same thing here. So I'm hoping that this can foster a greater sense of personal responsibility on all of our parts toward the planet, and that we can all feel like we can come together in this. That's my hope from this. Laura, did you have any thoughts?
I have one more thought, and that is that the CLEO Institute, we know what the core programs are. The Gen CLEO and the Speakers Network, that's definitely coming to Orlando. But Orlando's different than Miami, different than Tallahassee. And so if there's questions or concerns, we would like to hear them. We would like to work with you. We want to make sure that we're a good ally, a good partner. And if you're from another organization, thank you so much for learning about what CLEO has to offer. And there is some flexibility with CLEO, because we know that not every area experiences the same impacts.
So I'm seeing another question here that came up in chat. It says, could you guys comment a little about reducing waste in general and the relationship between that and climate change? And do you guys discuss that in your programs? Does anyone else want to take that?
Sure, I can go ahead. I mean, climate change is driven by the fact that we're burning too many fossil fuels, oil, coal, and gas. We're very reliant on these three sources of energy to fuel our needs. And that's really all of our industrial needs. So everything that we eat, touch, use, everything is manufactured and has some form of a carbon footprint, right? There's some form of greenhouse gases that are emitted in the process of creating that item or that piece of food. It's either transported. And so when we talk about reducing waste, it's not just food waste, it's how can we reduce our consumption in general? As many of us know, the United States is a very consumer-based society. We tend to prioritize our wants over our needs. And so we have a lot of stuff. And again, all of that stuff has a carbon footprint. And so we encourage people to think about, especially in these times when we're stuck at home and we can't go out and buy a lot of things and we're sort of limited in what we can do. I think I've heard a lot of people just talk about some of the reflections that they've had and how they might want to change their lifestyle moving forward once, you know, our world opens back up a little bit. So I always like to mention that if we were to continue business as usual, with the amount that we consume in the United States, we would need something like 4.5 planets worth of resources. And when we compare that to other nations that have larger populations than us, their amount of planets is much smaller. So it really makes us understand that we really need to think about how much we consume, that everything we do consume has an impact on the planet, and how can we rearrange our lives and change our values so that we are consuming less, and in doing so, opening up resources for future generations. And yes, we do discuss this in our programs in different segments of our presentation. Mainly we talk about it in the impact section as well as in the solutions section of our presentation. Plastic is a great example. A lot of people don't know that plastic is actually made from petroleum. And so if we reduce our single-use plastics use, we're reducing the demand for petroleum, and therefore we're reducing carbon emissions.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm just seeing one more thing, and I'm trying to remember whether we really covered this. Someone had added to the chat, write letters to the editor, which is a really powerful way to use your voice. So I just wanted to verbalize that. Yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh wait, what is the editor email?
Maybe they're asking what is a letter to the editor.
No, I'm seeing a question in the Q&A. It says, what is the editor email?
I think they might be referring to asking about what is a letter to the editor, possibly. A letter to the editor is usually a letter that we write to either a newspaper typically or some media outlet discussing issues of concern that we have. And sometimes these letters can be published, but it's a great way to bring up issues that you have on your mind, such as climate change or something in particular in your community. And maybe Aria, you could talk a little bit about the op-ed that you wrote and that was recently published on Earth Day.
Yes, yes, that was wonderful. I'm so glad that they published that. But I wrote an article about COVID-19 actually, and the connection, just my thoughts about the hopefully, that we can all find in this, and trying to use it essentially as a wake-up call. And I'm trying to remember the name of the seas. What's the name of the publication again? Something Rising Seas. Hold on a second. Okay, we've got someone put the link in here. Just great. Orlando Sentinel, The Invading Sea. Okay, so yeah, so I did have a letter to the editor that was published in The Invading Sea, and you know, I was so really glad that you joined us today. And I think anything else that anyone wants to add to this? I'm really glad that you guys were here, and just really hope that you'll get involved in the programs, because CLEO has made a really significant impact in a lot of directions by empowering people to, you know, really get involved, use their voices. And yeah, so please get involved.
Right, please feel free to contact me personally. My email address is lbetts@thecleoinstitute.org. Very, very delighted to see some people and friends that I know in the chat.
Thank you everyone for joining today. CLEO is really excited to be expanding in Orlando. We're excited to create new relationships and meet new people. Again, if you have questions, you'll be getting a follow-up email and you can contact Laura directly. So if we don't have any other questions,
I think we're good.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thanks.